The cold from the metal bench pressed straight through my coat, right into my bones. My name is Evelyn Carter. At 68, I never thought I'd find myself sitting at a deserted bus stop, rain dripping from the cracked shelter roof, clutching my purse and 3 wrinkled bills. No phone, no ride, and no family in sight. Just me and the sound of rain, the lonely glow of a street lamp, and the ache in my chest. Eric, my daughter Clara's husband, the boy I watched grow up with her since they were kids, helped me out of the car with a careful smile, set my bag down, and then he drove away. He didn't even glance back. His taillights disappeared into the mist, leaving me shivering, invisible, and alone. For a long moment, I listened to my own breathing, trying to make sense of it all. I'd spent a lifetime making sure my family never felt abandoned. Now here I was, left behind by someone who called me Mom. Every memory of raising Clara, her scraped knees, her wedding day, every sacrifice rushed through my mind like distant thunder. How does it happen, you wonder? How do you become the one left out in the cold? If you've ever felt that kind of emptiness, when both your body and heart go numb, this story is for you. Because sometimes, what your family doesn't know about you is the only thing keeping you strong. When people ask about my family, I usually keep it simple. Just me, my daughter Clara, and her husband Eric. But simple stories are never the whole truth. If you look closely, cracks always show. Clara was my only child, bright, gentle, a heart too soft for this world. Maybe I protected her too much after her father died. I built our life out of careful routines and quiet safety, always putting her needs first. Maybe that's why she never learned to spot danger when it wore a charming face. Eric came back into our lives 5 years ago. He and Clara had known each other since grade school, 2 shy kids growing up side by side in the same small town. Back then, Eric was the boy with worn-out shoes and bruised pride, living with his grandparents after his parents ran out on him. He'd always been clever, but hungry too. Hungry for something more, something I couldn't quite name. When he showed up at Clara's workplace after all those years, he was almost unrecognizable. A scar curved down his left cheek. His nose looked different, but his blue eyes hadn't changed. He told us a story about a car accident and expensive surgery, about starting fresh after a rough patch. Clara believed every word. She always wanted to see the best in people, especially someone from her past. I welcomed him in, thinking maybe he'd changed. Maybe everyone deserves a second chance. But little things started to bother me. Strange late-night phone calls, bills that didn't add up, whispered conversations Clara couldn't explain. Sometimes Eric would glance at me with a look I couldn't quite read. Other times, I'd catch him staring at the old lockbox where I kept family papers, his eyes calculating. He liked to tell jokes at dinner, but sometimes the jokes landed sharp. "You know, Evie," he once said, tapping his fork on the table, "you could afford a better place if you just cashed out your savings. No use dying rich, right?" He always laughed, but it sounded hollow. As months went by, Clara became more withdrawn. She stopped calling me after work, stopped sharing small joys. If I brought up Eric's moods, she'd change the subject or make excuses. I wanted to believe everything was fine. But I started keeping notes, a habit from my years handling legal work for a local firm. Dates, amounts, things that felt off. There was one night I'll never forget. Eric came home late, the smell of whiskey on his breath, his knuckles bruised. He sat at the kitchen table spinning Clara's wedding ring around his finger and muttered, "People always leave when you need them. Might as well get ahead before they do." I pretended not to hear, but my skin crawled. What did he mean by that? Sometimes at the bus stop or in the quiet of my empty apartment, I'd replay those moments in my mind. Were these just warning signs I'd ignored? Or were they puzzle pieces, waiting for me to put them together before it was too late? If you've ever sensed danger hiding beneath the surface, if you've ever ignored your gut, leave a comment below. Your story might help someone else find the truth before they're left in the cold. Trust is a strange thing. It builds up over years, brick by brick, quiet moment by quiet moment, and then, sometimes, it cracks all at once. Looking back, there were signs everywhere. Eric grew bolder with time. The first real betrayal was small. An overdrawn account that Clara didn't remember opening. A charge for something she swore she never bought. She asked Eric about it and he shrugged it off. "Must be a bank mistake, honey. I'll handle it." Clara wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe her. But the little mistakes piled up. My daughter, once bubbly and talkative, started looking over her shoulder, growing quiet at dinner, smiling less. There were arguments behind closed doors, muffled sobs I pretended not to hear when I came by with a casserole. The light in her eyes faded, replaced by something uncertain and scared. I tried to ask, gently, "Is everything all right, sweetheart?" Clara always answered too quickly. "Of course, Mom. You know how stressful work's been. Eric's just tired." But her hands shook, and I noticed new lines at the corners of her mouth. Lines that come from holding back too many secrets. One evening, I stopped by unannounced. Eric answered the door, his jaw clenched, his eyes cold and flat. "You should call first," he said, voice too calm. I stepped past him and found Clara in the kitchen, her phone face down, eyes red. There was a tension in the air that tasted like danger. I offered to make tea, but she just nodded, silent, hands trembling over the mug. The next day, Eric came by my apartment alone. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You worry too much, Evie," he said, folding his arms. "Clara's always been sensitive. She needs to toughen up if she wants to get ahead." His tone was almost mocking, as if I was too old and too soft to understand the real world. He glanced around my small living room, his gaze landing on the old family lockbox by my desk. "What's in there, anyway? Just old papers or something more interesting?" The question made my stomach twist. I brushed it off, pretending not to notice. But from then on, I started locking the box away and checking the locks on my door twice each night. Bills kept piling up at Clara's place. Medical co-pays, insurance notices, late utility payments. Every time she tried to ask Eric, he'd get angry, raising his voice just enough to shut her down. Sometimes she'd come to me for help. "Mom, could you maybe float us a bit this month? Just until Eric's new project comes through." I always helped, telling myself it was temporary. That's what mothers do, right? But Eric's projects never seemed to last. Money slipped through his fingers faster than water. I'd hear him late at night in the driveway, shouting into his phone, his voice tight and desperate. Once, I caught a glimpse of his phone screen, online gambling. It clicked all at once. The late nights, the missing cash, the anger. Eric wasn't just unlucky. he was addicted. As things worsened, Eric grew more paranoid. He started installing cameras outside their home, saying it was for safety. He checked Clara's phone to make sure she was safe. But I saw the way he watched her, like a jailer with his prisoner, always checking, never trusting. Then came the worst betrayal. One night, Clara called me, her voice shaky. "Mom, I'm so scared. Eric's been getting these threatening texts about my health, weird messages about me being sick, asking for money. He says someone is after us, but I don't know what's real anymore." My blood ran cold. I remembered Eric's words, his obsession with my lockbox, his constant need for cash. I started piecing it together. Eric was fabricating emergencies, sending fake texts to Clara from burner numbers, making her believe she was in danger, that only he could protect her, that she needed to give him access to her accounts for safety. And all the while, he was bleeding her dry. I hired a private investigator, an old friend from my legal days, to look into Eric's background. The truth was uglier than I'd feared. He was wanted in another state for financial fraud. His real name only recently changed. He'd had cosmetic surgery, yes, but not because of any accident. He'd needed a new face to outrun the law. But the most painful twist was this. Clara still loved him. She clung to the memory of their childhood, the boy who once shared his lunch with her in grade school, not the man who'd become a stranger in their home. I couldn't tell her everything. Not yet. If she found out too soon, she might warn him, or worse, blame herself. So I waited, gathering evidence, praying I'd be strong enough to protect her before Eric realized what I was doing. Sometimes I'd catch my own reflection in the window, hair silvering, eyes tired, but burning with a quiet fury I hadn't felt in years. I was done letting fear make my choices. Whatever happened next, I wouldn't be the one left behind. If you've ever watched someone you love slip away, caught between hope and heartbreak, leave a comment. Your story, your warning, could save another family from being torn apart by secrets. It's funny how the smallest things can change everything. A casual comment, an envelope misplaced, a single late-night phone call answered by the wrong person. Sometimes that's all it takes for a whole life to shift off its axis. It happened on a Tuesday, just after sundown. Clara called, sounding tired. "Mom, could you come over? Eric's not feeling well. He's in one of his moods." Her voice was tight, polite, but strained, like someone reading a script she'd been given. I went. I always did. But that night, the apartment felt different. The air was heavy, thick with secrets. Eric barely acknowledged me, hunched at the kitchen table, eyes darting between his phone and the window. Clara tried to smile, but there was a shadow in her gaze I hadn't seen before. After dinner, while Eric went out to get some air, Clara finally let her mask slip. "I don't know what to do, Mom. He says someone's watching us, that people from his past want to hurt me, to get to him." She twisted her hands in her lap. "I want to believe him, but sometimes I think he's lying, just to keep me close. I feel crazy." I reached for her hand. "You're not crazy, Clara. You're not alone, either." That night, after she went to bed, I noticed something strange on the kitchen counter. A stack of unopened mail, all addressed to Eric, but sent to different names. Some envelopes were from banks I didn't recognize. A chill crept over me. I slipped one into my purse when no one was looking, telling myself I'd return it later. When I got home, I called my old friend Rita, a paralegal who owed me a favor from years back. "Run this name," I asked, giving her one of the aliases. The results came back within a day. Outstanding debts, unpaid loans, even a warrant out of state for fraud. Every name led back to Eric, or whatever name he was using that week. I started keeping a journal, scribbling details, dates, times, snippets of conversation, the license plate of a car that parked outside their building for hours, always gone by sunrise. I wanted to believe I was being paranoid, but deep down, I knew better. Mothers know. One day, Eric cornered me by the door as I was leaving. "Evie, you ever think about getting older? About who'll take care of you?" His tone was too smooth, his smile too sharp. "Clara worries, you know. Says you live alone. All that legal paperwork. No one to help if something happened. Maybe you should move in. Let us help." He leaned in closer, voice dropping to a whisper. "Or maybe it's time to make Clara a signer on your accounts. For emergencies." My heart thudded, but I kept my face neutral. "I appreciate your concern, Eric, but I'm doing just fine." I left quickly, but his words stuck with me. That night I double-locked my door and checked my savings. Everything looked normal, on the surface, but there were odd charges, small withdrawals I didn't remember making. I changed every password, called the bank, and set up alerts. My peace of mind vanished. Meanwhile, Clara grew paler by the week. She stopped seeing her friends. She barely ate. Eric blamed it on stress. But one afternoon I overheard her on the phone in tears, whispering, "I just want my life back. I want to feel safe again." My heart broke, but I felt a steely resolve building. If I didn't act soon, I might lose my daughter to his control forever. So I played along. I let Eric think I was old, forgetful, an easy mark. I made small talk, laughed at his hollow jokes, pretended not to notice when he snooped through my bag or watched me enter my PIN at the grocery store. Behind the scenes, I dug deeper. Rita connected me with a private investigator, someone with experience in tracking financial crimes and digital footprints. Within a week, we found evidence Eric was routing money from Clara's accounts to an offshore wallet, using shell companies and stolen identities. He wasn't just gambling. He was laundering every dollar he could squeeze out of our family. Worse yet, we discovered he was working with a loan shark, a man known for violent tactics. If Eric couldn't pay, someone else would suffer. My hands shook as I read the report, imagining what could happen if Clara got caught in the crossfire. But the most chilling moment came late one night, when my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. "If you want to keep your daughter safe, don't ask questions." My blood ran cold. Someone was watching. That was when I realized I couldn't protect Clara by playing nice. I'd have to fight back, using everything I'd learned in 40 years of legal work and every ounce of a mother's courage. Eric wanted to make us feel powerless, but he didn't know who he was really dealing with. If you've ever had to pretend for your own safety, if you've ever hidden your strength so no one would see it coming, drop a comment. Because sometimes the only way to beat a liar is to play the game better than he does. People say a mother's intuition is never wrong. The more I pretended to be frail and forgetful, the more Eric dropped his guard. What he didn't know was that every time he tried to test my limits, I was already 2 steps ahead. A week after that anonymous threat, I decided to set a quiet trap. I invited Eric and Clara for Sunday dinner at my apartment. An old habit from happier years. I set the table with Clara's favorite blue plates, made chicken and biscuits from scratch, just like when she was little. Eric arrived with forced charm, but his eyes kept wandering to my desk drawer, where I always kept my mail. I saw the calculation behind his smile. Dinner was a dance of politeness. Clara barely spoke, only picking at her food. I watched as Eric poured himself a generous glass of wine, then excused himself to use the bathroom. It took less than 5 minutes for me to hear the telltale squeak of the desk drawer. I waited, heart pounding, then walked into the living room as if by accident. He froze, caught red-handed with one of my bank statements half hidden in his palm. "Oh, just thought I'd help you sort the bills," he said, covering with a laugh. "You know how paperwork piles up when you get older." I smiled, masking my anger. "Thank you, Eric. I've been meaning to organize that. But you know old habits die hard." I took the papers from his hand, holding his gaze just a moment too long. That night after they left, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the papers. One was missing, a deposit slip for a new savings account I'd opened under a trust, completely separate from my regular finances. I'd only left it there to see if he'd take the bait. He did. Now, I knew for sure he was watching, waiting for any opportunity to get access to my assets. The private investigator, Mr. Cole, called the next day with more unsettling news. "Evie, your son-in-law is desperate. He's been in touch with several men from out of state. One of them flagged in our system for organized fraud. He's also been placing small, suspicious insurance policies in Clara's name. You need to be careful." Insurance. My heart skipped. Was Eric planning something worse than theft? Suddenly, his offhand comments about getting older, about planning for the future, echoed with new menace. I went to see Clara the next morning. She looked exhausted, shadows under her eyes. "I don't sleep much anymore," she whispered. "I keep thinking something's wrong with me. Eric says I'm just stressed, but sometimes I find things moved around the house, money missing from my purse. And once my phone was reset to factory settings overnight, he says it's just a glitch." She started to cry. "Mom, am I losing my mind? Or is something really wrong?" I held her close, and for the first time, I told her the truth. "Sweetheart, you're not crazy. Eric is manipulating you. He's not who you think he is. I've been investigating. I have evidence." Her shock gave way to silence, then trembling anger. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she asked, tears falling. "I thought if I just tried harder, he'd love me like before. But he's only gotten meaner." I explained everything. The fake accounts, the missing money, the aliases, the insurance. I showed her photos Mr. Cole had uncovered from Eric's old life. Different names, new faces, always the same cold blue eyes. "You're not alone, Clara. I promise, I'll get you out of this." She shook her head. "I don't know if I'm strong enough, Mom. What if he hurts you? What if he finds out we know?" "We'll be careful," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "And we won't do this alone." That afternoon, I met with my bank's fraud officer, Rita's husband, Tom. We set up layers of security around my accounts, voice recognition, daily alerts, even flagged withdrawals. I contacted a trusted lawyer to draft a will and a power of attorney that excluded Eric from any access, no matter what lies he told. I began making phone calls to friends from my legal days, weaving a net around Clara and myself, ready to snap shut the moment Eric made his move. Meanwhile, Clara agreed to act as if nothing had changed. She would continue her routine, but secretly gather evidence, copies of texts, records of every time money disappeared, notes on Eric's behavior. She installed a simple security app on her phone and emailed me everything from her work computer, where Eric couldn't access it. Days passed in a tense blur. Eric seemed to sense something was off, becoming more controlling, more volatile. One night, Clara found him staring at her while she slept, whispering to himself. She pretended to be asleep, terrified. That weekend, Mr. Cole reported a disturbing twist. Eric had tried to buy a one-way ticket to Nevada using Clara's identity. He's planning an escape. If he gets what he wants, he'll vanish, Cole warned. The game was almost over, but not for us. For the first time, Clara and I were finally playing on the same team, stronger together than he ever expected. If you've ever had to fight quietly for your family's safety, or had to pretend until the time was right, leave a comment. Sometimes it's the secrets you keep that end up saving your life. The moment you decide to fight back, the world sharpens around you. For the first time in months, Clara and I shared a sense of hope, but it was laced with real fear. The closer we got to exposing Eric, the more dangerous he became. It started with a phone call. Mr. Cole's voice was tense. "Evie, Eric's meeting someone tonight, someone with a violent record. We're watching, but you and Clara must stay alert." I texted Clara our code. "Safe." She replied, doors locked, suitcase ready. That night, rain hammered the windows, and every shadow seemed to move. At midnight, Clara's message flashed. "Eric's not home. He left angry." By morning, Eric's rage had reached a new level. He stormed into their apartment, accusing Clara of betrayal, demanding to know where she'd hidden her secrets. She stayed calm, just like we'd practiced, documenting every threat, every word. When he left for work, she sent me the recording, her voice shaking. Meanwhile, Mr. Cole's team pieced together the final evidence. Eric's fingerprints on shell companies, fraudulent insurance policies, even a hidden camera in my own hallway. The footage was chilling. Eric snooping through my mail, staring at family photos, practicing the smile he used to fool us all. Rita, my paralegal friend, called breathless. "Evie, there's a warrant for Eric. Identity theft, fraud, even ties to a murder-for-hire plot. His mugshot is on the state task force site. But only you and Clara can ID him. Those eyes never change." Clara and I met in secret at a small park. We made a plan. She'd leave for a safe house that night. I would deliver all the evidence to Rita and the detective. We had to move before Eric realized how close we were. Every minute counted. At 8 p.m., Eric left to meet his contact. Clara slipped out, suitcase in hand, her heart pounding. She texted, "On my way." I thought it was over. 30 minutes later, Rita and the detective arrived at my apartment. We spread the files, hard drives, and voice memos on the table. The detective nodded. "We'll coordinate the arrest. Eric won't see it coming." But predators don't go quietly, not when cornered. Eric tried calling me from unknown numbers, leaving angry voicemails, even pacing outside my apartment in the pouring rain. I refused to open the door, my phone ready to dial Detective Simmons at the first sign of danger. I stayed put, curtains drawn, double locks checked. But Eric was patient and desperate. Near dawn, he vanished from the street. Hours ticked by. Then, just as the city was waking, my phone buzzed. It was the detective checking in, urging me to bring original documents downtown for the case today. I agreed. The evidence was packed in my purse. I waited until neighbors were out and the street felt safe. That's when Eric struck. As I stepped into the building's lobby, he appeared from the shadows, eyes wild, voice low and icy. "Going somewhere, Evie?" He forced a smile, then his grip tightened on my arm. "We need to talk. Alone." I tried to pull away, but he was stronger, fueled by rage and fear. In seconds, he hustled me outside and down the block, away from prying eyes. My mind raced. Stay calm. Stall for time. Don't show fear. He shoved me onto the empty bench at the bus stop, the same cold seat from the night this nightmare began. "Sit here and think about whose side you're on," he spat, searching my purse for my phone and tossing it into the gutter. "You wanted to play games? Now you're on your own." His footsteps faded, swallowed by the early morning fog. But what Eric didn't know, I had already triggered my silent GPS alert, tucked in my coat. Within minutes, the city bus pulled up. Its driver, a kind man who knew me from the neighborhood, realized something was wrong and called the police. Rita and Detective Simmons arrived almost simultaneously, relief etched on their faces. Eric didn't get far. As he returned to my apartment, hoping to destroy evidence or lie his way out, law enforcement was waiting. The hidden camera footage he'd used to stalk us became the evidence that sealed his fate. As the sun rose, I sat in the warmth of the patrol car, watching the city wake up, knowing the long storm was finally over. My voice shook as I called Clara. "It's done. We're safe." Healing would take time. But that morning, surrounded by people who cared, I remembered that even when you're left alone in the cold, there's always a way home. If you've ever survived a night colder than any storm, if you've ever learned the power of asking for help, share your story below. Sunrise after that night felt different, brighter, sharper, almost unreal. I sat in the warmth of the police cruiser, wrapped in a borrowed blanket, hands trembling not from cold, but from the crash of adrenaline and relief. For the first time in months, I didn't have to look over my shoulder. Clara's call came through before I even reached home. Her voice cracked with tears and laughter, relief flooding us both. "It's really over, Mom. He can't hurt us anymore." But even as Eric sat in a holding cell, everything felt unfinished. There were statements to give, evidence to review, questions from detectives and social workers. Rita was there every step, helping us prepare, translating legalese, making sure nothing slipped through the cracks. The process was exhausting. Testifying meant reliving every moment, the threats, the manipulations, the nights of cold terror. In court, Eric looked nothing like the man who once charmed his way into our family. His face was closed, posture stiff, his infamous blue eyes darting with a hunted look. He never met my gaze. Clara struggled too. Some days, she'd wake up in the safe house, unable to breathe, convinced he'd find her, that somehow the nightmare would restart. I watched her fight through panic attacks, nightmares, self-doubt. Yet through it all she showed up, each hearing, each interview, each time her story needed telling. I realized then, courage isn't about being unafraid. It's about moving forward, no matter how much you want to hide. Eric's defense tried to twist the story, called us hysterical, tried to paint Clara as an unstable wife, me as a scheming mother-in-law. But every time, the truth won out. The camera footage, the financial records, the testimony of friends and neighbors, all of it painted an undeniable portrait of a man who'd spent years manipulating, stealing, hurting. There was a moment on the witness stand I'll never forget. The prosecutor asked me why I hadn't given up, why I'd kept fighting even after being left alone at that bus stop. I looked at the jury, half mothers, a few grandmothers, a father or two, and simply said, "Because sometimes you're the only person left who can protect the people you love. And sometimes surviving is all the revenge you need." The court was silent for a long moment. Then someone in the gallery, another mother, maybe, wiped away a tear. When the verdict finally came, it was swift. Guilty on all counts. Identity theft, financial abuse, attempted coercion, and physical endangerment. The judge's words rang in the stillness. "You preyed on the vulnerable and destroyed the trust of the people who gave you everything. This community and this court will not tolerate it." Eric's sentence was long, years enough to ensure he would never hurt us, or anyone else, again. He was led away in shackles, glancing back one last time. But there was no power left in those blue eyes, only the realization that he'd lost, utterly and finally. Walking out of the courthouse, the world felt both enormous and new. Reporters called out questions, wanting sound bites about justice and survival. I paused for a moment, took Clara's hand and spoke clearly. If our story helps one woman find the courage to leave, or one family to spot the signs and take action, then none of this pain was wasted. Back home, the house felt different, still, quiet, almost sacred. That night, Clara and I sat at the kitchen table with mugs of tea, saying little but understanding everything. We grieved, not for Eric, but for the years he'd stolen, the trust he'd poisoned, the innocence we'd lost. But even as we grieved, something new took root. Clara began to talk about sharing her story, helping others. I started gathering resources, legal guides, contact numbers for shelters and advocates. We decided to start a group, small at first, but open to any woman who needed help, or just someone to believe her. It's not easy to heal. There are still nights when I wake up at the hour Eric left me at that cold bus stop, fear flickering for just a moment before I remember. I'm safe. We're safe. If you've ever found yourself in the dark, wondering if anyone would believe you, know this: you're not alone. There is always a way forward, even if it's just one tiny step, one trembling voice, one truth at a time. Leave a comment below if you need to be heard, or want to offer hope. Sometimes the bravest thing we do is simply refuse to give up. Scars don't vanish overnight, but every sunrise now feels like a fresh start. Clara and I still have our quiet moments. Sometimes the silence aches, but more often, it's peaceful. We've turned our pain into purpose, supporting women who feel trapped, starting a local group that meets every week. Each new story we hear reminds us, survival is not weakness. Speaking out is courage. I'm not the same woman who waited alone at that bus stop. I'm stronger. Clara is too. Together we learned that sometimes the only way forward is to reach for help and then offer a hand to someone else. If our story touched you, or you know someone who needs hope, please share this video. Leave a comment below. Your words might be the light for someone still struggling in the dark. And if you're ready for more stories of resilience, don't forget to subscribe and watch the next chapter on our channel. No one survives alone. Sometimes healing starts with a single voice, and you can be that voice.